In this presentation of this lecture, I'm going to go through the basic things about judging the Western riding class. Okay, so basically it's important to understand that Western riding really is what you consider a combination class of really a lot of control and skills. It takes into account a person's good equitation. There is, you could say, for some degree, a combination of reining and trail within the Western riding class. The thing that's most important to remember, though, is it basically is a class of flying lead changes, and that's probably the biggest criteria that, or biggest element that the class needs to be judged on. Sometimes we run into this at some of the lower level kinds of competitions, and remember, it is a judged event on the quality of those lead changes, the quality of movement, the manners and control that that horse goes throughout the class. It is certainly not a timed event. Okay, so some of the positive things that we're going to look at as a horse goes through the Western riding class are how collected is that horse. It needs to be accurate and smooth and very accurate about where the location of those lead changes are, and are they correct both in front and behind, and we'll talk about that as we move through the lecture. They also should be very steady. The horse should have a very even cadence and pace as he moves throughout the class. We're also going to give credit to how responsive they are to the rider. In addition, we'll look at the manners and the disposition of the horse, and naturally the ones that are quieter, kind of look like they're doing it on their own and very broke, are going to be the more positive ones. We want them to go along with a very relaxed head carriage, and they should be on a light contact or a somewhat reasonably loose rein. As far as the flying lead changes, it's the biggest element of the class, and we're going to look at the location of those changes because they are supposed to be centered between the two cones, and we'll talk about that when we look at some of the patterns. They need to be done in a very collected control kind of manner, and they should be precise and simultaneously both in front and behind together at the center point between the markers, either going down the line or across the arena. Okay, so here's how we lined up the markers. They're either going to be down the line here or across the arena. And here in red are the markers of those going down the line. And the brown box here is where the center point between those markers, and that is where ideally the lead change could happen. There will be no penalty assessed if he's within a stride of this center point. So we have a little bit of a leeway. And again, here will be the next center point between these two markers. Here it's just the circle with the X in it as far as the markers when we're going the crossing changes. And again, they need to be at the center point of the location between the markers as they're going across the change across the arena. And so the designated change area should be this brown box right here. We do again give them a little bit of one stride either side of the exact center to get those changes in. In a minute we'll talk about the penalties that are assessed if the location is not where it's supposed to be. Some of the general faults that are going to take down the maneuver score is if they're a very uncollected horse, if they're not in very much control, opening their mouth excessively, if you can tell that they're anticipating the changes, also horses that might stumble. We'll also evaluate their head carriage and head set if it's too high or too low, if they're nosing out or nosing back, and overflexing as far as the head set if their nose is consistently behind the vertical. Okay, this is just one general pattern. This is the first Western riding pattern, and as we talk about the pattern, we will talk the line changes. In this particular one on pattern 1, we'll have the changes down the line, and then we have the crossing changes as they go across the pen. There are several different Western riding patterns now in many of the associations, and they will all contain the various elements of going over a log and doing the changes both down the line and across the pen. They will also all have a stop and back. The markers, if you're setting it up, should be somewhere between 30 and 40 feet in space, and they'll be set to some degree depending on the size of the arena that's going to be used. Again, if you're judging a show, you'll pick from one of those 5 patterns, depending on what rule book you're using. Also, in many rule books anymore, they do have a green Western riding pattern that's a modification of the regular patterns that are a little bit simpler for those horses that are just more or less getting started in Western riding. On the basics, we score them on a scale of 0 to 70 being average, and 0 to 100, with the range for the maneuvers of the quality of the changes of +1.5 up to -1.5, and that's going to be with the quality of the changes and quality of the performance. Now, as in reining, we also have certain penalties assessed for things that they do incorrectly. And some of these you'll see are very similar to reining. Also, they're very similar to what we have in trail. So the half-point penalties are anytime they have a tick or a light touch of the log. Also what we consider a skip change where the hind legs come together during that lead change. Additional half-point penalties would be if they have a non-simultaneous lead change, which means they change from the front to hind or hind to front and are not done at the same time. Some more of the penalties, we have 1-point penalties. Those will be if they hit or actually roll the log. Additionally, if they do what we call splitting the log, which is similar to what we have in trail, where they don't meet that log in correct stride, and so they split the log either with the front feet or the hind feet. Now you need to watch this very closely because generally if a horse splits it with his front feet, he's out of step, and he will generally also split it with his hind feet. Additional 1-point penalties are going to include if they break a gait at the walk or jog for up to 2 strides, and then also if they're out of lead for more than 1 stride of either side of the center point and between the markers. And on a diagram, I can show you this and it'll be a little bit. All right, this is going to show you a little bit better the 1-point penalty locations. These are our penalties going to be down the line, and we've got our red markers for the cones. Remember, the brown here is the designated lead change area, and that lead change needs to be at this spot or within 1 stride out of it. So the 1-point penalties are assessed if they're at the center point of the marker up to this 1 stride area. So this would be assessed a 1-point penalty if it's an early change down the line. A late change down the line is going to be assessed in this area here, where he's a stride beyond the changing area up to the center point of the marker. Again, when we go across the arena, our crossing changes, this is going to be the designated lead change area, and so we have an early change from the center point of the marker up to that 1 stride of that box, from a late change of a 1-point penalty assessed from this location here up to the center point of that marker. Next are 3-point penalties anytime they break a gait at the lope, and that's each and every time they do that, which includes any simple lead changes. So anytime they jog or trot at the lope, that's going to be a simple lead change. Also, any additional lead changes are assessed a 3-point penalty, except if they happen to be correcting a change or an incorrect lead. Also, a 3-point penalty is a break a gait at the jog or at the walk or jog for more than 2 strides, so if they go an extended distance. Okay, some more of our 3-point penalties if they don't perform the specific gait or the jog or the lope, or don't stop for the pattern within 10 feet of the designated area. And you can see those on the different patterns, and that location will be just a little bit different. In pattern 1, if they fail to start the lope within 30 feet after crossing the log, would be a 3-point penalty. Also, we have our location changes, so if they're out of lead at or before the marker prior to the designated lead change area, and vice versa after the marker, those are assessed as 3-point penalties, and these are a little bit more clear when I can show you them on the diagram. Okay, so here's our diagram of going down the line. This is our designated lead change area. This is our 1-point penalty area where it's at the marker and within that 1 stride distance. So if this horse comes down the line and they still have not changed leads, and they're to where that next change should have been, and they do get the lead change, then that's going to be assessed a 3-point penalty, also if they do it too early in this location here. As far as the crossing changes, again, here's our change area, here's our 1-point penalty. If they still have not changed from the center point of the marker to this place to the next change area and get it changed, then that's going to be assessed a 3-point penalty, both either early or late. Now the 5-point penalties, if they're out of lead beyond the next changed area, failure to change a lead, cross cantering, which means they're in 1 lead in front or 1 lead behind. So if they don't change behind, they still are considered not to have changed leads. Remember, these are cumulative, and so if they fail to change for 2 changes, that's actually assessed 2 5-point penalties. Also, another 5-point penalty, as you see in our other classes, would be blatant disobedience, such as rearing, kicking out, bite, and those different types of things. Okay, so again, here down with our line changes. So if this horse has come down and he's not changed here and he's not changed here, and he still has not changed up to that marker, that's going to be assessed a 5-point penalty. Similarly, if it's way too early. On the crossing changes, still type of thing. If this is our 3-point penalty, and then if they're into this area here and finally get that change, that will be assessed a 5-point penalty. We do have some penalties also if they're off pattern and receive a score of 0. Basically, if they failure to follow the pattern and go off course, work on the wrong side of the marker. If they knock over a marker, and you do have to watch this because this does happen. Additionally, if they do 4 or more simple lead changes or do not change the lead, they are considered off pattern, except when you're judging novice classes. Also, if they completely miss a log, so they go around the log, that is also considered off pattern. Some other things that you'll run into that are considered off pattern: naturally illegal equipment, willful abuse. If they have a major refusal, and most often that's if they stop and back more than 4 steps where it's not supposed to be the backup. Some other things you can see here is not starting the lope in pattern 1 where it's supposed to be excessively far. Overturns of more than a quarter, and this again is similar to what we run into reining. Unsafe conditions, falling, and some of those other types of things. Again, remember that also in most of the associations, a score of 0 is also if there's 4 or more simple lead changes or failure to change leads. And we can take you to these. You can go to these later also, because these are 2 runs of some horses that are very good, and kind of 2 sample Western riding runs to take a look at.